The little boy dropped his spoon onto the marble floor of the luxury hotel restaurant, pointed across the crowded dining hall, and asked the question that froze every heartbeat in the room. "Daddy, why does that lady look exactly like me?" The woman standing near the glass elevator stopped mid-step. Her expensive leather purse slipped slightly from her shoulder as she turned toward the child. The CEO of one of the biggest tech companies in the city stared at the boy with trembling eyes, her face draining of color. Because the child didn't just resemble her a little. He looked exactly like her late younger brother, the brother she had buried 15 years ago after a tragic hospital fire destroyed her family forever. The entire restaurant seemed to fall silent under the golden afternoon sunlight pouring through the giant windows. Waiters stopped moving. Guests exchanged confused glances. And sitting at the corner table beside the boy was a tired single father whose worn-out shirt sleeves and exhausted eyes told a story of years spent surviving instead of living. He slowly stood up, shielding the child gently behind him, unaware that the next few moments would unravel secrets, heartbreak, and a truth powerful enough to change all their lives forever. Before we continue this emotional journey, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Lifeline Vibes, if you believe kindness and second chances can change someone's destiny forever. Your support helps bring more heartfelt stories like this to life. Cade Mercer had spent the last 6 years waking up before sunrise and returning home long after dark. Every morning he carried crates at a local produce warehouse before changing into a waiter's uniform for his afternoon shift at the Harbor Crown Hotel. His hands were rough from labor, his back constantly ached, and the dark circles beneath his eyes had become permanent. But no exhaustion in the world mattered more to him than the small smiling boy waiting for him every evening inside their tiny apartment. 7-year-old Milo was the center of Cade's entire existence. The boy was cheerful even when life gave him very little. Their apartment ceiling leaked during storms, their refrigerator hummed louder than a motorcycle, and most nights dinner was simple soup with stale bread from the hotel kitchen. Yet Milo always smiled as though he lived in a palace. He drew little pictures for his father and taped them onto cracked walls to make the apartment feel warmer. He told jokes during power outages so Cade would laugh instead of worrying about unpaid bills. And every single night before sleeping, he whispered the same words. "Thank you for being both my mom and dad." Cade never told Milo much about his mother because the truth was painful and complicated. 7 years earlier, during one stormy night outside a closed medical clinic, Cade had discovered a newborn baby wrapped inside a blue blanket near a dumpster alley. The infant was barely breathing from the cold. There was no note, no identification, no explanation. Cade had been homeless back then after losing his younger sister in an accident and drowning in debt from hospital bills. He should have walked away. He had no money, no family, and no future. But the moment he held that tiny baby against his chest and felt the weak heartbeat fighting to survive, something inside him changed forever. He spent the night sitting in an emergency room refusing to leave the child alone. Authorities searched for the parents for months, but nobody ever came forward. Eventually Cade became the boy's legal guardian. He named him Milo because the baby's small hand had wrapped tightly around his finger with unbelievable strength, as if refusing to let go of life itself. From that day forward, Cade worked endlessly to give the child the kind of love he himself had never fully received. Life, however, was merciless. Some employers refused to hire a struggling single father. Landlords mocked him. Wealthy customers treated him like invisible furniture. Cade skipped meals to afford Milo's school supplies and sold his late mother's necklace when Milo needed asthma medication during winter. There were nights when Cade silently cried in the bathroom so the boy would never see how close he was to breaking apart. But every morning Milo's laughter stitched his shattered spirit back together again. On the afternoon everything changed. The Harbor Crown Hotel was hosting an elite business luncheon for investors and executives. The staff had been warned repeatedly that one important guest demanded perfection. Her name was Celine Vale, founder and CEO of Vale Infinity Technologies, a billionaire entrepreneur known across the country for her brilliance, icy discipline, and emotional distance. Business magazines called her the woman who never smiles. Employees feared her sharp memory and impossible standards. Rumors claimed she trusted no one after losing her family years earlier. Cade had seen her face only on television screens mounted in electronics stores. He never imagined he would serve her table personally. Yet fate had its own plans. That day Milo's school unexpectedly closed early because of a broken water pipe, and Cade had no babysitter. Desperate, he brought Milo quietly to the hotel and asked the kitchen staff if the boy could sit in the employee break area until his shift ended. But during the busy rush, Milo wandered curiously into the restaurant hall searching for his father. That was when Celine saw him. The moment her eyes landed on the child, her entire body stiffened. The resemblance was impossible to ignore. Milo had the same silver-gray eyes as her brother Adrian. The same dimples. The same small birthmark beneath his left ear. Celine's chest tightened painfully as memories she had buried for years suddenly flooded back, hospital sirens, smoke, screaming nurses, and her little brother disappearing during the chaos after their parents died in a devastating fire. Adrian's body had never officially been recovered, though authorities declared him dead. Celine had spent years trying to forget the unbearable guilt of failing to protect him. Now this child stood before her like a ghost from the past. When Celine approached the table, Cade immediately sensed danger. Wealthy guests rarely spoke kindly to employees, especially when children disrupted events. He apologized repeatedly and tried to guide Milo away. But Celine's eyes never left the boy's face. Her voice shook slightly as she asked the question haunting her mind. "Where is his mother?" Cade hesitated before quietly admitting he didn't know. He explained how he found Milo abandoned as a baby and raised him alone ever since. The restaurant staff listened silently while Celine's expression shifted from suspicion to disbelief. Something about Cade's honesty unsettled her. He wasn't asking for sympathy. He wasn't trying to impress her. He simply sounded exhausted and sincere. Celine requested a private conversation upstairs in one of the hotel lounges. Cade wanted to refuse, but curiosity and fear tangled together inside him. Milo sat quietly beside the giant windows while adults discussed pieces of a mystery bigger than any of them understood. Celine ordered a DNA test immediately through her private medical team. Cade almost walked out, offended by the intrusion, but when he looked at Milo innocently coloring on a napkin, he realized the child deserved answers too. The waiting period lasted 3 agonizing days. During that time Celine couldn't focus on business meetings or presentations. She kept staring at an old photograph of Adrian smiling beside her during happier days before tragedy destroyed their family. Meanwhile Cade battled terrifying thoughts. What if Milo truly belonged to Celine's family? Could some billionaire take the boy away? Would courts decide a wealthy CEO was more suitable than a struggling waiter? Every fear imaginable consumed him. Yet he continued making Milo breakfast, helping with homework, and tucking him into bed each night as though nothing was wrong. On the 3rd afternoon Celine invited Cade and Milo to her company headquarters. The towering glass building intimidated Cade instantly. Secretaries in elegant suits escorted them through polished hallways that smelled of expensive perfume and fresh coffee. Milo squeezed Cade's hand nervously. Inside Celine's private office, the atmosphere felt heavier than stone. The DNA report rested unopened on the desk between them. Celine's fingers trembled slightly before she finally opened the envelope. Her eyes scanned the results once. Then twice. Tears suddenly filled her eyes for the first time in years. Milo was biologically connected to her family. But the truth stunned everyone even more deeply than expected. The report revealed Milo was not Celine's son. He was her nephew. Years earlier, Adrian had survived the hospital disaster as a teenager and disappeared into foster care under a different name after suffering memory trauma. As an adult, he later died in a car accident shortly after Milo's birth. The child's mother, struggling with addiction and homelessness, had abandoned the infant days later. Neither Celine nor any remaining relatives ever knew the boy existed. The room fell silent except for Milo softly asking whether he had done something wrong. Celine broke completely at those words. The powerful billionaire who intimidated boardrooms across the country suddenly knelt before a frightened little boy and hugged him while crying uncontrollably. Years of loneliness, grief, and regret poured out through tears she had hidden behind success and wealth. For the first time in decades, she felt a living connection to the family she believed was gone forever. But what moved her most was not discovering Milo. It was discovering Cade. The DNA proved Cade had no biological connection to the child at all. Yet he had sacrificed everything for him without expecting reward, recognition, or gratitude. While people with blood ties disappeared, this exhausted stranger chose love every single day. Celine had spent her entire life believing loyalty came from contracts, power, and control. Cade shattered that belief simply by being a father when he never had to be one. Over the following weeks, Celine began visiting their apartment quietly without security teams or expensive cars. She brought groceries at first, then books for Milo, then eventually stayed for simple dinners where the three of them laughed together around a tiny kitchen table. For the first time in years, Celine experienced ordinary warmth instead of cold luxury. She watched Cade repair Milo's broken toy with tape because he couldn't afford a new one. She noticed how Milo instinctively leaned against Cade whenever he felt scared. No amount of money could manufacture that kind of trust. One evening Celine asked Cade why he never gave up despite how hard life became. Cade looked toward Milo sleeping on the couch and answered softly that sometimes the people who aren't related by blood become the reason life feels worth surviving. He admitted there were days he wanted to quit, but every time Milo smiled at him, the world felt lighter. Those words stayed with Celine all night. Months later, she made a decision that shocked her board of directors. Instead of expanding another overseas office, Celine launched the Adrian Hope Foundation, named after her lost brother. The organization focused on helping abandoned children and struggling single parents with housing, medical support, and education assistance. And standing beside her during the launch event was not a politician or celebrity, it was Cade Mercer holding Milo's hand proudly beneath the afternoon sunlight. Cade refused luxury mansions or personal fortunes from Celine. Instead, she offered him something he had never truly possessed before: stability. She funded Milo's education, helped Cade open a small neighborhood cafe, and became part of their lives not as a distant executive, but as family. Real family. For the first time, Milo no longer feared losing the people he loved. He finally had a future larger than survival. Cade no longer carried the crushing burden alone. And Celine discovered that healing sometimes arrives disguised as unexpected strangers sitting quietly in the corner of a crowded restaurant. Before this story ends, if it touched your heart even a little, please like, share, and comment below to support Lifeline Vibes. Your engagement helps these emotional stories reach people who may need hope today. And now, a special request from us to you: comment the word family if you believe love is stronger than blood. Years later, customers visiting Cade's cafe often noticed a framed photograph hanging near the register. In the picture stood a smiling little boy between a former waiter and a once lonely CEO. Most people assumed they were an ordinary family. They never knew how much pain, sacrifice, and destiny stood behind those smiles. But perhaps that was the beauty of it all. Sometimes the strongest families are not born. They are found in moments of compassion, built through sacrifice, and held together by people who choose each other every single day.